everyone. Welcome to Season 2 of Chris's Classic Cinema. I'm Chris Wired, and this is my good friend.
Hi, I'm Jayden.
Yep, so it's a new season, and that means we're going to do some more movies.
Yes.
In this case, we're doing a salute to our military through 4 movies that deal with, what they do.
Yes, the military doing the military things that militaries.
And, I'm talking the Army, the Navy, the Marines.
Space Force.
Yeah. So, it's very this is going to be very interesting, isn't it?
I think so. I think it'll be interesting. We got 4 good movies for you. To start off with, we're going to be doing a pre-coded film, Wings. And then we're going to go into Iwo Jima. Then we're going to do The Longest Stay. And then the last one...
An Officer and a Gentleman.
Yes. I always forget the name of that last one.
Yeah. So like she said, this first movie, we're going all the way back to 1927.
Mm-hmm.
Right at the end of the era of the silent film.
Oh, and we're talking border year. It is a literal border year.
And this movie is also very notable for being the very first Academy Award winner for Best Picture.
It's not the only thing that's noted worthy for being the first of, but we'll get into that.
In the movie, Wings. A pair of friends find themselves in the middle of World War I, and as the war progresses, at first they were rivals, falling in love for the same woman, and then there's another woman who is in love with one of the guys, but he doesn't even notice.
Mm-hmm.
And as the war goes on, they find themselves ace pilots, and it all ends in a very bittersweet note.
It really does, and it's in terms of the 2 women involved, it's the typical girl next door versus supermodel.
Yeah.
Which is a very common trope that's as old as the film itself, really.
Yeah, well, I gotta say, I can definitely see why this movie won that Oscar.
It won the Oscar because it came out at the exact time when being an ace fighter pilot was bigger than being an actual movie celebrity.
Think about it. It was around the time that Charles Lindbergh made his famous flight across the Atlantic on the Spirit of St. Louis.
And not only that, but Amelia Earhart would also be doing that. And then you got Howard Hughes. He was really big in the time, too.
Yeah, and 20 years later, he would fly the Spruce Goose.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. In fact, one thing of note is Howard Hughes actually got a look at the script. Because there's a couple of cameos that you should probably bring up before I even bring up Howard Hughes.
Yeah, one of them happens to be a very young Gary Cooper.
Mm-hmm. And it was actually a very young Gary Cooper where this was one of his breakout films. And Gary Cooper got a hold of the script early on and actually brought it to Howard Hughes to get Howard Hughes' take on it. They were actually good friends in Hollywood at the time.
And the thing is, Gary Cooper was on for only 3 or 4 minutes.
Not even that. It's not even that. He was literally in one scene.
Yeah. But let's talk about the main cast. You have the main guys, Jack and David, and at first they're definitely rivals because they're both falling for the same girl, but as the war progresses, they become very close friends.
Yeah. And it's definitely, and you can definitely see that rivalry really early on, especially during basic training, when there's the one scene where the hat gets smushed, which is very disrespectful in those days. In those days, the kind of hat you wore signified your social status. So to have someone's hat get literally booted was actually the lowest level of disrespect anyone could have done at the time.
Yeah, but as the war goes on, their friendship grows. Mm-hmm. One of them has his, they both have their little good luck charms they have with them.
Yes.
One of them is just a very tiny little teddy bear.
Yeah, that was Dave's teddy bear from his childhood.
Yes, and his mother had it, and he's like, I'm going to keep it.
As a good luck charm. And the mother was like, you better bring that home. You better come home with it,
Yeah. And then you have Jack, who is more, he's the kind of guy who, he basically friend zones the girl next door.
Yeah, to put it lightly, Dave is the rich eccentric who has the money and the charm, where Dave is the bright young inventor who always wanted to fly ever since.
Jack is the one who wants to fly.
Jack is the one that wants to fly, and even goes as far as to build a hot rod, a Model T, to go faster.
Yeah, and he calls it the Shooting Star.
Yes, a moniker which carries over into the plane. And
Yeah.
Fun fact, a lot of the modifications he made were actually pretty common modifications for Ts. They mentioned how they added extra gears in the transmission. That was the most common, that and Rocky Mountain brakes were the two most common modifications you can do to a Model T. I suspected it was more than most likely just an overdrive, and it made the Model T go from 35 miles an hour top speed to 50.
And then you have the girl next door, played by the original It girl, Clara Bow.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if any of you don't know, Clara Bow was known as the It girl because a concept was created by a woman named Eleanor Glynn, and the idea of having it basically means that you have what it takes to attract the opposite sex.
Yes. Yes.
And when it came to Clara Bow, she literally starred in a movie called It.
Yes.
She was the first It girl. It was a hit at the box office, and next thing you know, there are more It girls out there that you can think of, like, let me see, Marilyn Monroe.
Yep.
Nowadays, it'd maybe like Margot Robbie.
Yeah, yeah. And a fun fact about Claire is she actually hated the set design. She actually hated the costume designs and actually made her own tweaks to the costumes before going on camera, much to the dismay of actually a lot of the costume set designers and the director.
Yeah,
you know?
the director William Wellman. We already did a movie of his before. The original version of A Star Is Born.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when it comes to the director, he does a very good job.
Yeah, well, the reason he did such a good job is because he himself was a fighter pilot during World War I. And the reason why he was selected to be a director was because of that, you know. And William actually went out of his way to make sure that all the major cast members knew how to fly a plane pretty well, so that they can get the authentic camera shots behind the plane. With the actual actors behind the wheel. And they actually brought in former ace fighter pilots from World War I. Because again, you know, like, if you were an ace fighter pilot from World War I in the 1920s, you had it made. Like, you were a celebrity, you know. And so it was actually pretty common to bring in these former World War I vets to do these scenes.
And the flight sequences, man.
They were so good. The filming took 9 months, and a lot of the time in the 9 months was just waiting for the perfect days. You know, like, there were some scenes where they wanted to make sure that there were clouds in the background so that it could add a little bit of gloom to the fight scenes. But a lot of it was shot in the desert, believe it or not. You wouldn't think it, but yeah, a lot of the scenes and shots done for the planes was done in the middle of the desert. And they were just making sure that the weather was just perfect.
And then there's other innovations too. Like that famous dolly zoom across the tables at the Folies Bergère.
Yeah.
They literally cut the tables in half. The camera would come forward and they would move the table. They would split the table in two, and they would just keep going until it reached the end.
It's a wonder why this movie didn't get sound. With as many innovations as this movie did, and there were definitely talkies back then. You would wonder why they didn't do sound.
1927, I mean, it was the year that talkies became a thing because of the jazz singer.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, it's interesting because the movie got 2 releases. Did you know this? It got 2 separate releases. One where there was an audio track spliced in, which was the OST, and all the sound effects, and then the other one without that, so that an older movie house could still do the sound effects on their own. So yeah, the movie actually had 2 different releases, one with sound, one without. Huh. But it was filmed as a silent film.
Yeah. Yeah, when it comes to this movie, I gotta say, it really gives you some respect for those pilots.
Oh my gosh, yes. You know, and it was even said that Charles Lindbergh himself, as well as a lot of the other famous aviators in the day, often would tip their hat to former ace pilots because, as they would put it, anecdotally, yeah, you talk about how they, Charles Lindbergh flying across the Atlantic and doing all these stunts and all that. Well, those World War I ace pilots were doing that like 5 or 10 years prior, just unnoticed because it's war.
That is true. Yeah. And when it came to this movie, it was a hit at the box office.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it even reached. I think it was the top grossing film of that year, if I recall.
It was, yeah.
And it won 2 Academy Awards at the very first Oscars,
Mm-hmm.
including Best Picture, and another was for a category that only for that 1 year, Best Engineering Effects.
Yeah, yeah.
It was sort of like a precursor to visual effects.
Yeah. Well, back then, I mean, yeah, well, there's also the scene with the bubbles.
Oh,
after
yes.
all. So there was a lot of visual effects that were really bleeding edge. Not the first movie to do any of this stuff, mind you, but there were but it was a bleeding edge film.
And this movie does also have a few good laughs, especially with the bubbles.
Oh, yes, yes.
I mean, Jack is so drunk after drinking champagne that
he's seeing
everything
bubbles coming
everywhere.
out of bedposts, literally.
Yeah. And then you have that one guy with the Stars and Stripes tattoo.
Yeah, and he's able to flex his muscle to make the flag wave a little bit.
He has a very foreign name, but he's like, I'm as American as any guy can be, and he just shows the tattoo.
But every single time he does that, he has to flex his muscle like this to make it look like he's going in for a punch and getting ready for a fight, and then just gets walloped.
Yeah. So all in all, what would you give this movie?
I would give it a 4 out of 5.
That's me too.
Because there's also a couple other things that are worth acknowledging too, like the fact that it was also the first movie that had nudity in both genders. It was also the first movie that had not 1 but 2 same-sex scenes. So, debated if it's romantic or not, but it is a first.
Yes.
And not only that, it came out at exactly the right time. A lot of risque stuff was in the movie because it's pre-coded, but that was also the time. That was a very popular subject, was risque. And it was also, planes were also very popular as well. Like a lot of the bespoke sports cars that America was building at the time, like the Duesenberg and the Brutes Cat and all that, had this giant dash full of a bunch of unnecessary gauges, just like a plane.
Yeah.
So like it was the right movie at the right time.
It was also around the golden era of the Zeppelins too.
Exactly.
I mean, it wasn't until the Hindenburg blew up that they basically became extinct.
Yeah, so this was the perfect movie for the era. Like, if there was any movie to really like be put on the silver screen during the Art Deco age or the Roaring '20s, this is definitely a movie that would. It's no wonder it was a smash hit.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. I mean,
Yeah.
It would be higher if it was a talkie.
Yeah.
Because the movie is almost 100 years old.
Yeah, but it's like opening a time capsule.
It really is.
So that was Wings. Now we're going ahead to 1949 with a movie that was made just a few years after World War II ended, and it deals with like one of the most crucial battles of that era. I am talking about the movie Sands of Iwo Jima.
Yes.
A group of men are assigned to a sergeant who is very gruff and teaches them how to survive through World War II. Next thing you know, they find themselves on the front of Iwo Jima, watching the famous raising of the flag.
I would, if you want a grit movie, it doesn't get much more grit than this. It really doesn't. It's John Wayne being the most John Wayne-iest John Wayne he's ever John Wayne'd. Like he speaks very slowly and lethargically. He's very tough and is down on the men like a ton of bricks, and has shows very few signs of weaknesses,
Yeah, I mean, even with the scene with the baby.
Yeah, like just the definition of a tough guy at probably his peak, I would say.
Which is ironic, because if I recall, he didn't serve at all in World War II.
He did not. Too young. Wait, was he too young? No, he was. He was able to serve, but just didn't.
Yeah. And then there's the other cast members too. I mean, they're pretty good. You have this one guy who basically despises the sergeant because something happened between them that got him demoted.
Yeah, and it's pretty obvious how they both got demoted at one point, because like it was showcased fairly early on that he served under Conway, and this Sergeant Conway, and would often get into fist fights and be a real tough guy. I'll say that.
Yeah. I mean, there's even this, and then you have other characters too. Like there's this one guy that basically falls in love at first sight.
Yes.
Marries her immediately.
Yes, and then immediately becomes bitter when she's going around Europe being a showgirl.
No, that was another guy.
Was it?
There was that other guy that he met a girl, they married, and next you know he finds out he's a father a couple of months later.
Yes. Yeah, that was Conway. That was the Conway the second. There was a Conway Senior and Junior.
Yes, and the sergeant had worked with his father, but now he's working with his son, and you can tell that when it comes to the son, he doesn't want to. He really doesn't. He's not as military.
Yeah.
As his father was.
Conway definitely. Well, because John Wayne played this sergeant called Stryker, I believe his name was.
Yes, Stryker.
And Stryker was definitely the kind of guy that looked up to Conway Senior. But when Conway Junior came along, Conway Junior was definitely the kind of guy that was more of a socialite, was college educated, went to 2 universities, and really only joined the Marines because everyone in his family did.
And he doesn't even want that for his kid.
No, he does not.
He wants the boy to have like a more intellectual lifestyle.
Yes, to be a proper gentleman, to be a socialite.
Yeah. And then you have the scenes with him and his future wife, and
yes,
it's amazing how fast they can click in those movies.
Yeah, they do definitely rush in a lot of those aspects. But back in which it wasn't that far from the truth, because a lot of times a guy will fall for any girl, pretty girl, and they'll become wedlocked, and there's benefits for both of them. Guy gets a really cute girl, girl gets American citizenship. Because she was from New Zealand.
Yeah.
She was in New Zealand at the time, so it's heavily implied that she was not American.
Yeah. And then you have the war sequences.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Now, they're not bloody or anything like that. I mean, it's not like Saving Private Ryan, but
no,
they really show like the harshness of the Pacific War.
And you can definitely tell that there are certain scenes that looked a little off, but definitely authentic. A lot of stock footage was definitely used from the archives of World War II. So they actually did use genuine World War II footage for a lot of the scenes, and they even used over 2,000 different World War II vets to help make to help bring more authenticity to the film.
Yeah, and when it comes to that final sequence of Iwo Jima, it's like,
yeah, it's heavy. It's a real heavy scene.
Especially, but then you literally feel like a sense of inspiration when they lift the flag up at the mountain.
Yeah. Yeah, it's no wonder that the famous photo, I think, won a Pulitzer Prize, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. And it's not one of the most iconic images you can think of when it comes to Marines. I mean, they literally did a statue of it at Arlington Cemetery in D.C.
Yeah, it's also one of the most famous it's one of the most common tattoos that a lot of the Marines will select as their first tattoo as well.
Yeah. Apparently, one of the soldiers they brought in was actually from Wisconsin, John Bradley.
And not only that, but one of the one of the extras who actually helped raise the flag, actually rose the flag.
Yeah, although when it comes to John Bradley, they found out later that he actually wasn't part of that famous.
No. But it was there were literal millions of men that fought in the Pacific. You got to remember that. So it isn't too surprising that John Bradley wasn't at Iwo Jima.
Well, he was there, but he just didn't raise the flag.
No, he didn't. But they did bring in people that did.
Yeah, he even wrote an autobiography about his time there, and it became a movie from Clint. I think it was Clint Eastwood who did it. Flags of Our Fathers.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, when it came to this movie, it was a hit at the box office, and it also received some Oscar nominations. John Wayne was nominated for Best Actor.
He was nominated. I don't think he won, though.
No, he didn't. He lost to Broderick Crawford for his performance in the Best Picture winner of that year, All the King's Men.
Yeah.
The movie Sands of Iwo Jima was also nominated for other awards like Best Original Story, which was for the screenplay.
Yeah.
Best Sound, and Best Film Editing.
Mm-hmm. I don't really have that much good to say about this compared to Wings because it is because they're really, in terms of production value, it was pretty decent, but it was pretty par for the course compared to a lot of films. There were a lot of other films that were doing way more with cinematography back then than this movie was.
That I can agree with.
You know, there was no VistaVision, there was no experimenting with color, there was no really jaw-dropping visual effects. It was just a gritty war movie.
But it was still very popular for its time.
It was. Well, it was still fresh in everybody's mind. I mean, it came out in 1950, 5 years after World War II.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all in all, what would you give this movie?
I'm going to give it a 3. Just a 3.0. Because even
3 out of 5?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'll do 3.5.
Yeah, because if you're a John Wayne fan, it's a must. It's about as John Wayne as it gets. You know, if you want to see like his grittiest forms, but you don't want to watch yet another Western, it's a pretty good movie for what it is.
Funny thing is, John Wayne honestly didn't think he deserved a nomination for this movie.
No, he actually thought this was one of his worst performances.
He thought he should have been nominated for another Western he did for that same year called She Wore a Yellow Ribbon.
Yeah. You know what? Let's segue into another John Wayne film.
Yes. But this movie is much bigger. I'm talking literally a cast of over 100, of thousands.
From 4 different nationalities.
From 1962, it is the epic reenactment of the invasion of Normandy, The Longest Day. Now, when it comes to The Longest Day, it tells the basic story of the invasion of Normandy, how it was a turning point for World War II, but it also talks about how it affected both sides of the war.
Yes.
Both the Axis and the Allies. I mean, like she said, there are people from different nationalities. I mean, not just the Americans, but the British, the French, the German.
Yeah. And they wanted to when doing this movie, they wanted to make sure it was authentic as possible. But it was also getting to the point where the movie is 3 hours long. And, so imagine how long it took to do multiple shoots for cast and crew to do all this for both sides. Yeah. So they didn't. They did it all at once. They actually had several different sets of cast and crew members, and they were filming at the same time. So
5 directors, if I recall.
5 directors and 4 different sets of cast and crews.
And some of them were really big names.
All of them were really big names for their respective countries.
Yeah, I mean, like she said, John Wayne played a colonel. Mm-hmm. But the funny thing is, the actual colonel in that battle, he was half the age of what John Wayne was in the movie.
Well, yeah. There were definitely some liberties taken there, in the movie.
This movie isn't 100% accurate to D-Day. But if anything, it's not as gritty. It's not as graphic as Saving Private Ryan.
No, I'd say that out of the 2 John Wayne films we've discussed, this one's the better one. And I think a lot of that also comes down to the authenticity. They even brought in high-ranking officers from 4 different armies, from the German, American, French, and British armies. Yeah, they actually brought in on set high-ranking former Nazi party members just to get that extra level authenticity.
Yeah.
So think about the kind of people that were also behind the scenes saying, okay, this is how it went down. These are the line of events. They wanted to make sure that this documentarian style movie was that. It was a documentarian style movie. Then they wanted it to be as accurate as possible.
And the movie was actually based on a nonfiction book written by a guy named Cornelius Ryan.
Yeah, who sold the rights. I believe he sold the rights for like 6 digits, which is a lot of money at the time.
Yeah, and there was a huge cast. I mean, a lot of them, you have big names from America like Henry Fonda, Red Buttons, Richard Beymer, who you might know as Tony from West Side Story.
Mm-hmm.
And let me see what else. Also some big celebrities, big teen celebrities of the time like Paul Anka, Fabian. And then when it comes to the British, you had people like Richard Burton and Roddy McDowall.
Mm-hmm.
They were actually, funny thing is, they actually wanted to be in, the only reason they were in this movie for those short scenes, because they wanted to at least get some work because of the troubled production of Cleopatra.
Yeah.
Another movie that was being made by 20th Century Fox.
Mm-hmm.
So they were so bored. They just wanted to be a part of it, and they were willing to do it for free.
Oh yeah. And I think there was that one French actress. I don't know her name, but there was the amount of authenticity and the amount of hands on deck for this movie is jaw dropping. Like when you look at all the production facts, there's literally like a massive list that's too long to get into.
Right at the end credits, it looks like almost every single big actor in the movie.
Yeah.
Even Sean Connery.
Yeah.
And the guy who played Goldfinger do have short scenes in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this was just before Sean Connery, as soon as he was done, he went straight to Jamaica and started doing the first James Bond movie, Dr. No.
If you want the definition of a superstar film cast, this is it. For the 60s, this is about as superstar of a cast as you'll ever get.
Yeah, and when it comes to and it had some other big names too, and some of them were very known for the British community as well. Like you had a general played by Kenneth More.
Yeah.
He was the guy who whacked that car to get it back going.
Yeah.
He had already starred a few years earlier in a reenactment of the Titanic called A Night to Remember.
Yeah. Now, as much as we talk about authenticity and how grand the movie is, there are flaws. Like, for example, the dummies that were used to deter, the Ruperts.
They weren't as elaborate as we see them in the movie.
No, they were sandbags.
If anything, they were just like hand-knitted sack bags.
Yeah, they were literally bags of sand tossed out of the side of a plane with a bed sheet strapped to them.
Yeah.
That was it. And it worked. But
you gotta admit, that was a pretty clever strategy, though.
It is a clever strategy. It also and there's a lot of other things about it too that a lot of people will go, oh, that's a bit like the wacky antics of the British Army.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean.
You literally have a guy playing a bagpipe in the middle of a battle.
Now, granted, a lot of people will go, nah, that's just them downplaying the British Army and how goofy they were. It's like, no, actually, that was accurate. Look up Jack Churchill. There was several people that were playing bagpipes in the middle of the battlefield, and they themselves were getting kills.
Well, the thing is, that one bagpiper that was by Sean Connery, the original bagpiper, the Germans didn't even want to shoot him because they thought he was crazy.
Yeah. They're like a lot of the British antics. They were trying to show how weird and intricate the battle was, and it was. It really was that intricate and weird at times. Like there were some really eccentric personalities amongst the British ranks that were fighting alongside Americans and the Canadians and Australians and the Frenchmen.
And then you have the Germans on the other side, and you can tell like they're
frustrated. They're so angry.
They are expecting an invasion.
They know it's going to happen, but they just don't know when. And
next thing you know, they can't do anything because apparently Hitler was taking sleeping pills and.
Well, that is a dramatic oversimplification of what actually happened. You know, I mean, it is and it isn't. What was really going on at the time was that the Germans were really not doing well on the Eastern Front against the USSR. So a lot of the resources got redirected to that. Plus, the one accurate thing they did get was the weather was pretty poor. You know, like it was illustrated fairly early on that everybody was basically on high alert and ready to go any second. Like everyone was trigger happy. But the weather had made them postpone the battle once, and they were debating about doing it a second time.
I mean, when it comes to the French guy on the radio, all it took was a single line from a poem to tell people
We're going. We're going now. You know, and it's like, and it was that intense and that kind of a hair-raising moment back
But it can also be pretty crazy, too. I mean, you have that. I mean, one of the phrases is simply, John has a long mustache. Next you know, there's this guy going nuts because, oh my God, they're coming.
Well, yeah, I mean, it really was like that, though. It really was. Now, granted, they actually didn't use those kind of words. They actually, for code to send coded messages, they were using other more intricate languages that no European would ever hear of, like Cherokee and other Native American languages.
Huh.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah, no, a lot of the codes that the Allies used were actually taken from Native American languages because they were so foreign to the Germans. There was no way to decipher it.
Now, with that aside, let's talk about the production because this is as big as a war movie as you can think of.
Oh my gosh, the production value is insanity, true insanity. Because again, you have to understand. There was 5 different directors, at least 4 different cast and crew members, a lot of time working at totally different sites, you know, production sites.
And here's the thing. 20th Century Fox was already having trouble with Cleopatra, so they were worried that, and I mean, it was already over budget, and they thought they couldn't even...
Oh, yeah. That's another thing, too. It was grossly over budget.
Yeah, but the cinematography, my God.
It was so good.
It's some of the best I've ever seen for a black and white movie.
It is. It is. I agree.
I mean, you have that whole sequence of the French army invading that city, and it's over a minute. It's about a minute and a half. Mm-hmm. But you see like the entire battle overhead from like a helicopter in one single shot.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, like the amount of you gotta wonder how. Like these 5 directors must have been really on point with the coordination in terms of the cinematography, because you would think that everything would be kind of hodgepodge together, and it was, but you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't.
It's done so flawlessly.
Yeah, you know, I don't think even with modern techniques anybody could pull that off today. Again, I don't think that level of synergy and cooperation could happen again. I just don't.
Yeah.
And if it could, you would basically need to do what you did back then and get the best of the best, no matter the budget or money. But
I mean, when it comes to the editing too, I mean that whole scene with Red Buttons as the Private John Steele.
Yeah.
I mean, you see him dangling from a church in the town of Saint-Marie-Glisse.
yeah,
Next thing you know, with the editing, you see all of his comrades getting shot down, but he's still stuck. And he can't even. I found out that the real private, he was named an honorary citizen of that town.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And they still have on the church a full-size dummy of him still strapped to a parachute on top of the church.
I thought that was I didn't know that part was real. I thought that was just a bit.
And the thing is, they even have a restaurant named after him in that town.
Wow. Okay. Now I have a reason to go to France.
Yeah. Yeah. Frankly, I wouldn't mind visiting that town.
Just for the dummy alone. Just for that alone.
It's more like a statue, really, but
oh, come on.
It's a statue dangling from a church on a parachute.
It can't be. I mean, okay. Question then is, if it's a statue, does it need to be made of stone? Because dangling a chunk of stone from a church like that must be a pain.
Well, I don't know how they do it really, but
I'm sure it's probably just like
But the thing is, imagine being stuck up there for like 2 hours, hearing those church bells going on and off all the time.
Not to mention all the fire and ammunition going, like all the ammunition's going
And next
around.
you know, he gets shot in the foot,
Yeah,
and he's just dangling there like a dead guy.
yeah. He might as well have been. He could have been easily
He was
dead.
actually. I found out that he was actually captured, but he was able to escape.
Ugh.
And then you have the guy played by Richard Bamer. In the beginning, you see him winning a crap game, and just like that, he has over $2,500 with him.
On the
According
eve
to
of
the inflation
E-Day.
calculator, that'd be about as much. That'd be almost $45,000 today.
Yeah, $2,500 is you can buy a really, really nice car after the war. I mean, like a really nice car.
I'm talking like a BMW nowadays.
Oh, back then it wouldn't be a BMW. You would get a 1949 all black Cadillac,
And
like,
the
or
thing
something
is,
like that. Like that's the kind of, and you wouldn't. And that's only about half.
and
that
the
money.
thing is, he actually loses all that money because next you know he finds he's given a little cross necklace,
Yeah.
and he's like, okay, last time I was lucky, I ended up in the hospital. I don't want that to happen again. So he actually loses all of that money,
Yeah.
but he's going off with a clean spirit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I also love the scene between him and Richard Burton.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so interesting seeing two different big stars of that time just together chatting, smoking cigarettes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And they were big when it comes. And the funny thing is, they both played tragic lovers in movies. Richard Bamer played Tony in West Side Story, and Richard Burton was doing Mark Antony in Cleopatra at that time with
Yeah.
Liz Taylor.
Yeah. You
So
know,
that was really something.
it is.
But then you have the scenes with Sean Connery that are just so funny.
Mm-hmm. They're good. I
mean,
like them.
Who knew? I never thought I mean, I know John. He can get a few laughs as James Bond, but
Yeah.
just seeing as getting a few laughs out of him as just another character,
Mhm.
you don't get that often.
No. You know, so this was definitely again.
And you see Goldfinger on a horse delivering coffee to the. And next thing you know, the bombs start falling down, and he's just out of there.
Mm-hmm. Overall, what would you give the movie?
Well, let me continue. Let me say a few
Sure.
words. The Longest Day, it was the movie that 20th Century Fox needed.
Yes.
It became the highest-grossing film of 1962, just beating Lawrence of Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
And it really helped save 20th Century Fox from bankruptcy. I mean, sure, Cleopatra came out a year later, but it didn't even break even.
Mm-hmm.
It would take The Sound of Music to actually completely save the studio from bankruptcy.
Yeah. But this movie definitely helped.
Yeah.
It definitely kept the lights on a little longer.
And The Longest Day received 5 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and Best Film Editing. And it won 2 for the cinematography, which it definitely deserved, and for the special effects.
Yes. Also deserved. And the editing is also deserved as well.
Yeah. And you know, there's just so many scenes in this movie that I just love so much. I could just go on about them. Like, I mean, you literally see a guy searching in the water for it's a chaplain looking for his communion set.
Yes.
And like, seriously, in the middle of a battle?
Yeah. And the thing is, I don't know if that happened or not. I didn't fact check that one. But any goofy thing that happened in the movie, it's literally flip of the coin if it's true or not. Because a lot of it is. Like, a lot of it is true. Bagpipes and all.
Yeah, but then there are some things that are not accurate too. I mean, that whole scene with the casino and the nuns, that never happened.
No. That would never happen.
All in all, when it comes to this movie, I'm giving it 4.5 stars out of 5 because, my God, this has got to be one of the best war films ever.
I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. If not, but the only reason I'm deducting points here is because it's a really long movie.
Like she said, it is almost 3 hours long.
It is 3 hours. It is. I think it is just kissing on 3 hours.
And the funny thing is, Paul Anka actually wrote a song called "The Longest Day" for this movie.
Yeah.
The music is heard near at the end with the credits.
Yeah. So it's a very, very long-winded movie. Definitely the kind of movie where you basically need to be like, if anybody's even remotely interested in World War II stuff or D-Day in general, it's definitely a must.
And if you want to see something that's not as graphic as Saving Private Ryan,
Yeah.
this is definitely a good alternative.
It's a very good alternative.
Especially if you want to show it to maybe your kids or just teenagers in general.
I think it's a good movie to show to teenagers because it also because it's a documentary style, so it breaks it down pretty palatably.
Yeah.
And in a way that I think it's appropriate for a lot of teenagers.
Yeah. Yeah, and when it comes to the whole story concept in general, showing both sides, it would be used later on in another World War II movie, the movie about the invasion of Pearl Harbor, Tora Tora Tora, in 1970.
Mm-hmm.
It showed both sides of the American and the Japanese when it came to that invasion.
Yeah.
When to the attack, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a good World War II movie, this is a must-see.
I'd agree.
So that was The Longest Day. Now for our final film, we're going to 1982. Well, it was one of the most successful movies of that year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still very... And it's also in honor of one of the actors who recently died earlier this year, God rest him. The movie, An Officer and a Gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
A man joins the military wanting to be a pilot, but he has to deal with many things. Like, there's this extremely harsh drill sergeant who is basically on him every day. He ends up falling in love with a worker who and he's been told to avoid women because they just want to marry people in the military.
Mm-hmm.
He also has a friend who is very close to just breaking down.
Oh yeah. Well, that part there is also pretty hard to watch.
Yeah. I gotta say, for an 80s movie, this wasn't that bad.
I thought it was okay. Unlike the other three films, this one isn't so much a war movie as it is I'd say it's more of a romance film.
It's
a
more
romance
of a military
drama.
a military romance.
Yeah, a military drama romance movie. A drama. Yeah, it's a military drama film. I think that's a more accurate description.
Yeah, but when it comes to the storyline, there's no battles, there's no fighting. Well, there is fighting, but it's more of fist fights.
Right.
Compared to, like, war battles.
And it features this young man who has a drunkard of a father who was a former Navy salesman. Had a really rough upbringing because his mother died when he was quite young and felt very betrayed by his father. And unfortunately, the father wasn't exactly the best character, best fatherly figure he had growing up. So his early days of being in boot camp were him just flirting with the factory worker as well as selling contraband items for extra cash.
And also dealing under the brutal hand of the drill sergeant.
Yes.
Let's talk about the cast. So for the two main leads, we have Richard Gere and Deborah Winger as the two people who fall in love. Mm-hmm. They do have a good chemistry.
But only on camera. It turns out off set they didn't like each other too much. Yeah, they didn't really care for each other. It wasn't until much later after the film was released that they started gaining respect for one another. But during the actual filming, there was definitely tension between the two.
And then you have Keith David as his friend. Mm-hmm. And he's definitely more vulnerable compared to Richard Gere's character.
Yes.
I mean, he also falls in love with the girl, but she's more of a gold digger.
More into I'm going to entrap you into marriage type person.
Yeah.
Even going as far as to fake a pregnancy.
Yeah. But then you have the drill sergeant, played by the legendary, the late great Louis Gossett Jr.
Oh yeah.
He's got to be one of the most brutal guys I've ever seen in a movie. And he was actually trained by the guy who was the drill sergeant in Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah. So it wasn't like, he was just being brutal to be brutal. No, he was being an authentic kind of brutal that was very correct for the time in terms of being a drill sergeant.
But that has changed since then. I mean,
yes, dramatically so.
I mean, I read an article on the internet of how much drill sergeants have become more well, not as tough as they were like back
It's
then.
a little bit more relaxed, and it's more of a break. We're going to break you down and build you up, but we're not going to be as hard on you, and we're not going to force it on you. And another noteworthy thing of note is that he actually was sleeping in separate quarters to the rest of the cast and crew members, so that they wouldn't interact and get too close to him. That way, he could still be a little bit more intimidating on set.
Yeah, I mean that whole big fight that he has with Richard Gere near the end.
Yeah,
It's when basically all of their fury just goes all out.
it does. But at the time, it was a lot of the time when a drill sergeant does that, they don't do it just to be, just to be an ass or anything like that. It's so that they can break you down. And you can even see at the end of the movie that he opens up with the same lines that at the beginning of the movie when they have a new list of recruitments. The whole point is you want to have the best of the best behind those fighter jets. You really do. You can't have a soft person behind it. So breaking a person down is to kind of weed out the people who aren't really mentally or physically able to do it.
I mean, even one of the recruits is a woman who wants to prove herself,
Yes.
and she keeps struggling, trying to climb up a wall. Next, you know, there's Richard Gere just telling her to just
Get on the wall. Stop being soft. You can't be an officer to men if you can't climb a wall.
yeah, but
And that's true.
I think that could be very inspiring for even some girls who want to join the military.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the military isn't for everybody. Like for me, for example, there's no way. There's no way.
Same with me. I bet I couldn't even survive a day in that boot camp.
But you know what that means is that we aren't really worthy of piloting a fighter jet. And perhaps that's for the best.
I can agree to that. And when it comes to the movie too, I mean, some of the shots could be really nice.
Oh yeah,
with the location.
And the location, of course, being the former U.S. Army base, Fort Worden. So they wanted to use an actual military base, but the Navy wouldn't let them. So they had to settle for a former one that was close by, and that's where Fort Worden came into play.
Yeah, and this is a drama because there's definitely a lot of stuff that happens. I mean, some of them literally leave like, oh my god, I can't believe that just happened.
Yeah, like a lot of it we're not going to really worth mentioning.
No spoilers.
We're not going to spoiler it. It's also really heavy. It's the really heavy subject matters. So.
And before anything else, this movie is rated R because there is
Yes.
There's cussing. There's nudity.
Yes, it is. It's definitely an adult film. There is a edited for TV version that did come out. It reduces some of the sex scenes by quite a bit, and it leaves out a lot of the heavy cursed lines in the movie.
Yeah.
So it is edited down a little bit. So there were two versions. So if cursing and nudity is something that offends you, there's definitely a safer version, but it still has a lot of the heavier subject matters like suicide, for example, and other really rough subject matters that, frankly, isn't for everybody. So fair warning.
Yeah, and when it comes to the music, too, I mean, it's definitely 80s music.
Oh, my God. It's so 80s. Everything, a lot of that about the movie is 80s. Even the ending with the freeze frame.
I mean, he just graduated, he gets the girl, and next thing you know, they're basically walking off into the sunset with a freeze frame.
Yeah, like, it gives Labyrinth a run for the money for most 80s film ever. No, I'm sorry, nothing can beat Labyrinth. You want to watch that? Go watch our previous episode.
When it comes to the music too, I mean, the song "Up Where We Belong," I mean, it was very popular for when it came out.
Oh yeah.
I can't imagine how many people were listening to it on the radio at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I wouldn't have listened to back then. I mean, I'm definitely I'm what one would call a connoisseur of 80s music. That's not one I would really go for, but it's still a good song.
Yeah. Now, when it came to the movie, like I said, it was a hit at the box office. It was like the third highest grossing film of that year, behind E.T. and Tootsie.
Yeah.
It received 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Actress Deborah Winger,
Oh yeah.
Best Original Screenplay, Best Original Score, and Best Film Editing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah. And of course, it lost original score to E.T. I mean, John Williams. My God, that music is legendary.
When you're going up against E.T., you're going to lose no matter what. I'm sorry, but you are.
Yeah.
And this is coming from me.
Deborah Winger lost Best Actress to Meryl Streep for perhaps one of the most iconic roles, Sophie's Choice.
Yes, yes.
But the film did win 2 Oscars. Best Original Song for Up Where We Belong, which was named by the American Film Institute as one of the top 100 greatest movies of all songs of all time. And then Best Supporting Actor, Louis Gossett Jr. And he earned it.
Oh, yes, he did. Yes, he did. And he will be missed for his role. I think he'll be missed in the film industry.
If you about a month ago, I saw the movie If, and I can't believe that a guy that rough could have so gentle a voice in that movie.
Yeah, oh yeah. You know, and there were other contenders for a lot of the actors, like for both the drill sergeant and the main protagonist as well. Like for example, John Denver was in the running, Jeff Bridges was in the running. Couple other famous names as well, like John Travolta. None of them made the cut, but I think that was arguably for the best. Although it would have been interesting to see John Travolta, but
yeah.
And like even the drill sergeant, they were other people that were kind of prospected, but they
like
selected.
Who?
I don't remember the name, but he was a famous one. I'll have to look it up and tell you later.
Oh.
So that you can edit that in post.
Yeah, and when it comes to the American Film Institute too, I mean, this is An Officer and a Gentleman is on some other of their lists, like one of the top 100 most inspiring films, and one of the top 100 most romantic films.
Yeah, because if it's one thing that you really take away in the film in terms of inspiration is you gotta follow him. He never gave up. Like even when he was told we are gonna make you give up, he didn't.
Even when that whole sequence when he was just doing drill after drill,
and the sergeant
and
just
he's like, I have
him,
nowhere else to go.
Yeah. And that's when you know that he's basically earned it. That though, especially with suffering such a horror, like selling contraband is a really serious infraction.
Yeah, it wasn't until the very end that he finally earned the respect of the drill sergeant.
Yeah.
So all in all, when it comes to this movie, I thought it was okay.
I thought so too.
I'm gonna give it maybe a 3.5 out of 10.
I agree. 3.5 is a good score that I'm going to agree with.
Yeah,
it's a little bit too 80s in some aspects. Some of the subject matter is pretty harsh, but the chemistry between the main, but the chemistry with the drill sergeant, I think is my favorite aspect of the movie.
Yeah, we're gonna miss you, Louis Gossett Jr.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, that was my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah. So, there you go. This next episode, we're getting ready for the Olympics, so we're going to be looking at 4 movies that deal with different kinds of sports. So, with that in mind, thank you for watching the season premiere of Chris's Classic Cinema. I'm Chris Wyatt.
And I'm Jayden.
And I hope to see you all again. So, have a nice day.